In this video, I'm going to explain to you the two mental shifts that you need to make to raise pre-seed and seed funding in today's startup fundraising environment. Now, these two mental shifts are based on the common mistakes that I see early stage founders make. And after looking at hundreds of pitch decks, talking to hundreds of investors, doing investor relations every single day, I've seen enough of these mistakes, and I've seen how it's worked out for the founders and how it's worked against the founders. Now, let me explain mental shift number one. You have to shift your mindset from raising based on milestones to raising using inflection points. I repeat, milestones versus inflection points. And shift number two is, I want you to learn to raise a seed round as if it's the last round you're ever going to raise. Forget the A, B, C, D, E rounds. Get them out of your mind and just think, my seed round is going to be the last round I ever raise. And you might be thinking, Ed, that flies in the face of everything that I've learned so far, but I'm going to explain to you the reason these shifts are so important. Before we continue, my name is Ed Kang, 7-time funded founder with 2 exits. That's just a fancy way of saying I failed a bunch of times to get your attention because I want you to learn from my mistakes. It's not that you're not going to make mistakes, but I want you to learn from them and avoid some of the catastrophic failures that I faced during my startup career, especially when it comes to fundraising. And if you like this type of content and you think what I'm providing is valuable, I would love your support. Please like, comment, subscribe. Let me know. It's always very encouraging. It's been encouraging up to this point in time. Let's jump in. I think a lot of founders are experiencing right now how hard it is to raise funding. It is not 2021 anymore. Capital is not cheap. The money's not flowing in the land of milk and honey. It's just not the same. Whereas before in 2021, we were watching checks get written and get deposited in 4 weeks. Now it's taking 6 to 9 months. The standards are much higher. Founders have to do so much more. The terms are getting stronger and more rigid. It's a tough environment. And as I look at the founders that I'm talking to right now that are successfully raising money, there are two common attributes that I see. And this is the mental game, all part of raising pre-seed and seed funding. Now, back in the day, what used to happen, especially if you're an early stage founder, you used to say, all right, I'm ready to begin building my MVP. I'm going to hit that milestone, so I need some funding. And there was a friends, family, and associates investor or generous angel that said, all right, I believe in what you're doing, so let's help you hit that milestone and let's give you the money to build your MVP. And in another scenario, if a founder had bootstrapped their MVP and got it launched, they would go out and share that milestone and say, our MVP is ready to go out to market, we're ready to start making money, and we need that funding to get to that next step to actually go get customers and start growing our revenue. And if you hit that milestone and you're able to demonstrate that you actually built something to investors, they were open to investing. That was then, this is now, not anymore. So what's the difference between a milestone and an inflection point? An inflection point is simply a moment when that startup, during its phases of growth, increases in value suddenly. There's a shift in value because there's been some type of breakthrough. Now, a lot of times, milestones are part of those inflection points. Let's say you hit a milestone where you ship a new feature and suddenly there's this renewed sense of interest. Or you hit this tipping point, this critical mass, where you hit your 100,000th user and then suddenly the exponential curve starts to go. That's a milestone you've hit, but it's created an inflection point where the value has suddenly geometrically increased in your startup. That is what's going to hook investors and get their attention. Inflection points. Get it in your mind, think inflection points. So let's compare two different scenarios. In scenario A, the founder goes out to the investor and says, can I have money because I need to hit this milestone? I need to launch my MVP, or I've launched my MVP and now I need to add marketing. I've proven that I can build something, so now fund me. Or the founder that goes out there and starts the relationship with the investor and says, I want a check as soon as I show you an inflection point in my business. An inflection point could be anything. It could be suddenly a celebrity customer coming on board, or suddenly figuring out an automated marketing tactic that cracks a new way, a new blue ocean where customers are suddenly coming in. And that's when the founder goes to the investor and says, I've got great news. We've just hit this major inflection point. I think you're going to see that we've created this geometric upside of value. If you do that enough times, you are definitely going to hook that investor. You're going to get them interested because you're communicating to them at those inflection points where you're creating real value, the upside of that value, versus just simply communicating based on milestones. We just hired a person. We just shipped this feature. We just did this. We just did that, blah, blah, blah. It all starts to just jumble together in the investor's head because every other founder is raising on milestones. But if you set yourself apart and you raise on inflection points, you are going to get their attention. That means you have to shift. It's no longer about just traction. It's about meaningful traction to get you those inflection points. And that's where you can start to get creative. You can start to say, what can we do to suddenly increase the value? Maybe it's getting a new advisor on board or a strategic partner or figuring out a completely different market where you're able to monetize so much faster. The best part is that you can hit inflection points without needing funding at all. Every inflection point can be bootstrapped. I want you to hear me very clearly. Milestones need funding. You need funding to reach that next level where you're shipping the next version of your product, where you are launching in a new market, where you are spending more on ads to increase and get you to the point where you've hit that milestone of ROAS. But the best inflection points are when you create something out of nothing. So when you bootstrap, guess what? The inflection points don't have to be as big than if you spent $100,000 on your marketing or shipping a feature or something like that. Now look at the ROI that you have to generate that $100,000. But if you get creative and you can be that founder that's relentlessly resourceful and is showing that exceptional quality that you can go do something special without the investor's money, how do you think they're going to respond? You've got them hooked. This leads us to the amount of money that you should be raising. The mistake that I see founders make today, which makes sense because we observed this behavior in 2021, were ludicrous valuations and massive seed funding rounds. There was just what my colleague Elliot Schneer at startups.com calls goofball money. There was so much of it, big checks were being written. It's just not like that anymore. Investors are expecting founders to do more with less and to get you on a path of profitability sooner than later. That means generating revenue right from day one. Get to revenue as soon as possible. So this means you need to raise a smaller round and show them what you can do with the money and to reach an inflection point with that smaller round. Instead of raising $1 or $2 million pre-seed, I want you to raise $500,000. Even less if you possibly can. You're going to give away less of your company and you're going to have less investors jamming up your cap table. Because guess what? Those seed investors, those institutional investors especially, love clean cap tables. The cleaner your cap table, the more room that you've got to negotiate a better deal with them in the future. But here comes the trick. You're going to take that $500,000 and you're going to reach an inflection point and you're going to stay in touch with those investors and meet new investors along the way. And when you hit that inflection point, you are constantly doing investor relations, updating everybody out there so they start talking about you. And suddenly when there is a launch, an inflection point, and everybody gets excited and they start experiencing FOMO, you are going to raise enough money in your seed round that you never have to raise again. This is going to put you into an interesting position. First, if you raise enough that you never have to raise again, because you're really good at those inflection points by this moment in time, you can just create a really solid, profitable company that will continue to grow and you'll just be fine and your investors will be happy because they're not getting diluted by subsequent rounds because you have to keep raising money. The other thing you're going to do is you're going to change the power dynamic. You are going to raise money in the future if you want, because you might not have to when you don't need money, and that's the best time to raise money. Problem that I see founders make today, and if you're guilty of making that mistake, don't worry, I've seen it multiple times and I understand where it comes from. You put in your ask slide that we are raising enough money for 18 months runway. Or the other version of this is we're raising enough money and our milestone is we're going to go from seed funding to a round. That's not going to cut it anymore. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you have those inflection points and you're building a solid company, the investor will be okay having that conversation with you to give you more money in the seed round so that you've got a plan that you don't have to raise anymore. They just want you to build a solid, profitable business. Because the days of going pre-seed, seed, factory model, and then I want to sell to the A and then B, and that's how these funds and everybody raise more rounds and charge management fees. Those days are going to be over. Now, obviously, there are companies and investors that are going to make gobs of money still with that old factory model, but I just don't think it really worked. And I think the entire investment community is rethinking the factory model of venture capital. So you're going to start to see some really interesting trends happen from investors. Mark my word. But if you take that tempting seed money and you get yourself into the VC factory mode, your options are virtually nil. You have to go through the meat grinder of VC. And like I said, I'm not poo-pooing that. Sometimes a founder needs that type of money to go build the baby unicorn that's in the rocket ship that's going to go to the moon, like I always say. But you're going to be building a solid business, and you're not going to be competing, and you're going to preserve who you are as a founder, your mental health, your energy, your lifestyle, and you're going to have a healthier approach to being a founder, which is what I'm all about. If you've hung around this channel long enough, you know I'm not an advocate of sacrificing your mental health and your well-being on the altar that is startups, especially VC-backed startups. And I cannot say this enough. If that's you and you want to go down that path, more power to you. I'm just being open and transparent with you. That's not me. And I think there are so many other founders that are thinking the same way. So in summary, make that mental shift. I want you to think about inflection points versus milestones to set yourself apart. Don't get frustrated if investors are not paying attention to you because you're raising based on milestones. And then I want you to raise a pre-seed round, stay in touch with investors, build your network, get to that inflection point, and then raise while the iron is hot, the opportunity is there, raise the seed round like you'll never have to raise again, and build a profitable company so you are in the driver's seat and you've got options of never to raise again and go riding into the sunset and have an amazing time. And you switch the dynamic of all the hard feelings that we experience when we're trying to raise money at early stages, when it feels like the investors have all the power and they're lording it over us. That's going to change. You're going to be on equal footing with the investor. Treat the investors well because they're going to be your friends and everybody's going to be making money, but it's going to be a fair, even playing field. And that's what I want for every founder that I work with. I think you are going to see this new wave of unicorns, spelled Y-O unicorns, based on what you want, based on your lifestyle, based on your dreams, your hopes, your ambitions, based on you, which is different than the factory model founder that goes through the VC meat grinder and eventually goes public. I think you're going to see a lot of these, and I look forward to sharing stories with you, and maybe you out there, you're one of them. That's it for now. Check out these other videos to watch, and remember, mental shifts. I'll see you in the next video.